His face reappeared as I stood in the rear studio of a northern Wisconsin community art co-op, my hands still smeared with varnish. I hadn't unsubscribed from a startup newsletter, but it was on the front page. It was one of those digest emails that I typically don't read. However, I noticed this in the subject line: BioGlow takes off into the national scene. Meet the founder transforming nature into light. Before I even clicked, I felt sick to my stomach. Eli Raymond, who I used to see across our kitchen table, was there smiling the same disarming smile. The same unkempt hair he never quite managed to tame, the same leather jacket. I was facing a bright wall of resin panels bordered with moss that I was all too familiar with, since I had constructed them. Not only the layout, the whole idea. From the first drawing to the procurement of materials, to the prototype that was lit up at 3 a.m. in our former basement. And I sobbed with fatigue. I didn't assist with the pitch for BioGlow. I did it myself. He was aware of that. The day after I lost the baby about a year ago was the last time I saw Eli. We had spent 4 years together. For one, engaged. After graduating from graduate school, we began working together to establish BioGlow, with me handling environmental engineering and design, and him managing investor relations and networking, the aspects I never had the stomach for. I believed that we were creating a future. However, things quickly altered after the miscarriage. Eli fell silent, agitated. He claimed that I needed time and that I was different. He suggested that in order for me to recover, we should take a break from business stuff for a while. For the most part, I was too damaged to protest, so I agreed. He took our prototype laptop and pitch materials. He told our investors he would keep things warm and promised to get in contact. He wasn't. The shared drive was offline by the time I realized he had stopped talking altogether. There was no longer a Slack workplace. Our business calls from the number he had used ended up in voicemail. 8 months have passed since then. And now he was introducing my creation as his single masterwork on a national scale. When Jules, the co-op manager, entered the room behind me, I realized I was trembling. "Are you okay?" With her eyes following my fixed gaze to the newsletter on my phone, she inquired softly. I gave a hasty nod. "Indeed." "Yes, I am. All right." However, I wasn't. When she was gone, I took a seat on the edge of the desk and grabbed a simple sketchbook with thick, uneven pages that I hadn't touched in about a year. The week I graduated from design school, I received this one from Professor Hanley, my former mentor. I carried it with me everywhere. Ever since Eli departed, it had been blank. Slowly, I flipped it open. The following were written in Hanley's tidy block letters on the first page: "Avoid erasing yourself, even when others make an effort." I looked at it for a while. Then I flipped to the next page, grabbed a pencil from the cup next to me, and began drawing once more. Not for an investor, not for a pitch deck, not to prove anything. To keep in mind what was mine. I had not given it much thought since before the miscarriage, but then I remembered something else. Eli was unaware of it. I had concealed something in the initial prototype. For the first time in months, I felt as though I might not be helpless after all. Eli was attempting to use charm to get into a startup incubator demo slot, for which he was not eligible when I first met him. I was attempting to avoid hyperventilating while double-checking my notes in the hallway outside the application room. "Do you think they'll notice I spelled bioluminescence wrong on the title slide?" he asked, leaning close, as if we were already conspirators. I chuckled. He smiled. By the end of the month, we were eating ramen 3 nights a week and writing prototype notes on bar napkins after both of us passed that pitch round. He was 31 and sick of referring to himself as a consultant, when all he wanted was a title that sounded genuine. And I was 28 and sick of people labeling me idealistic. We were the kind of chaos that had momentum when we were together. BioGlow began modestly. A feasibility study evolved from a napkin doodle. A prototype made from carefully maintained algae and scavenged LED boards evolved from a feasibility study. Eli spoke. I constructed. He pitched. I made the edits. We counterbalanced one another. It seemed like everything fell into place when we found our first seed investor, a quiet angel who liked unlikely duos and believed in climate tech. Together we moved in, purchased workplace cups that match, began to build long-term strategies, and everything stopped when I became pregnant. We didn't try. Not that we weren't trying. When I demonstrated the test to him, his eyes widened, and he took hold of my hands and exclaimed, "We can do this right." I trusted him. 10 weeks later, there was a miscarriage. From a medical perspective, it was early. Uncomplicated seemed like the cruelest phrase the doctor used to describe it. But it broke me emotionally. It was not my intention to open my laptop. I had no desire to construct anything. I didn't want to act like I was all right. Eli withdrew so quietly that I was initially unaware of it. He called off meetings, claimed that we both required time, stated that the investor updates should be put on hold. I promised him that after I felt less dazed, I would catch up on the tech stack. He didn't wait, but he nodded. He then informed me one morning that he needed a vacation from everything, and that he would be spending some time with a friend in Detroit, stated that just in case, he would bring the demo unit to continue demonstrating it, said, "We will speak shortly." We didn't. Over the following few weeks, I made 3 attempts to get in touch. The initial email bounced. There was no response to the second. The third received a succinct response. "I believe that our paths are diverging. I wish you tranquility." No justification. No follow-up. Let it go, I told myself. I even made an effort to think that perhaps I had misinterpreted the partnership. Perhaps he had the concept all along. Perhaps my grief had caused me to hold too firmly to something that wasn't mine, and I had only been a helping hand. However, I later came across the pictures in the newsletter. The design was visible to me. The phrase, "Let the dark glow differently," caught my attention as well. I own that. While drawing node layouts on the back of a cereal box one night in bed, I wrote that. When I said it, he laughed and said it sounded poetic. Even I hadn't been all that fond of it. He was adamant that it would stick, though. And there it was now. On his new launch deck cover. On his new, well-designed website's front page. Hours passed while I gazed at it, recalling something I hadn't considered since the beginning, before the seed money, before we hired a lawyer to prepare any formal documents. I basically did it out of habit, and as a fail-safe. A digital signature built into the prototype node's firmware. Every time it lit up a proprietary tool, I'd named LightLog, placed creator tags, and saved timestamps inside the root code. It was a silent affair. It wasn't ostentatious. It was mine, though. Additionally, there was a significant likelihood that LightLog would still be residing inside if Eli had utilized the original prototype or even recreated it. He wouldn't be aware. The embedded logs were never examined by him. Claimed that was my specialty. With a thumping heart, I slowly closed the laptop. After all, I hadn't lost everything. I convinced myself it didn't matter for months. That it was preferable to remain unaware. Eli was simply moving on as ambitious people do. Perhaps I was the one who misinterpreted everything. Perhaps I had devalued myself in the anguish and conjured up an imaginary betrayal. Technically, he hadn't taken anything. A co-founder agreement was never signed by us. BioGlow was never registered as an LLC by us. We had the working demo, the pitch deck, and some shaky cash from a handshake investor. It was all trust and smoke, and everything else disintegrated along with the trust. In any case, that was the narrative I held on to. A means of remaining numb and avoiding more difficult inquiries. It was simpler to assume that I had been too weak, too sluggish, or too preoccupied. I put all of my energy into the art co-op, assisted local children in creating murals, conducted workshops using used materials, repaired damaged chairs, and filled teacups from charity stores with plants. No one there inquired about my background. All they did was give me room to create. Late at night, however, I would lie in bed and ruminate about the prototype while holding the notebook on my chest and gazing up at the ceiling. I wondered if Lightlog was still there, hidden beneath layers of larceny like a thumbprint. The prototype was no longer with me, but I had a memory. I had sent an earlier model to Dr. Selma V., my former advisor from the Madison Design School, around 2 months prior to Eli's departure. The concept of nature-based technology had captivated her. Stated that as part of a lesson on biomimicry, she wished to present it to her environmental studies students. We had given that unit the file name V2MNT, which were my initials. Eli had made fun of me for writing my name on everything. He used to remark, "You're like a squirrel with your metadata. If no one notices the tree, what good is it to hide your nuts?" I didn't respond at the time, but now I knew the solution, because someone would look one day, and I would have to show where it all started. With my hands shaking a little, I retrieved Selma's old email from my stored Gmail. I was still amused by the subject line from more than a year ago. "Your prototype shines in my window like a firefly with debt from graduate school." After inhaling, I typed, "Hello Selma, do you still have the early BioGlow demo I sent? It's a strange request. That version might assist in refreshing my memory as I seek to recover some of my original files. I would love to stop by if you still have it. Nora." An hour later, she responded. "Nora, of course. It's still in the window of my office exactly where you left it. Visit us at any time. And I hope all is well with you." I gazed at her response for a while. For the first time in months, someone inquired about my well-being. I had no idea what the response was, but I was aware of my next course of action. Jules gave me a thermos, which I filled with 2 strong coffee the following morning, packed a little overnight bag, and got into the car. I had been out of town for about a year. My gut clenched more and more as I approached Madison. Every exit sign has ghosts. Nothing had changed in Selma's office. On the windowsill, the same potted ferns are wilting. The same sarcastic eco-quotes on coffee cups. She gave me a longer hug than I anticipated. She pointed to the BioGlow panel in the corner and remarked, "Still glowing." When I plugged in the battery pack, the light continued to pulse, even though the moss inside appeared somewhat dry. She went on, "I always meant to ask how you did that." I gave a half smile. "Very little engineering, a small amount of faith. I connected the prototype to the custom firmware tool I had created back when BioGlow was just ideas and hope," as she went out to answer a call. Slowly the log loaded. The screen scrolled with the text. ID of the device, MNTV2MNT date, of build, March 12, 20xxn. Teller is the primary developer, NN. Teller made the most recent firmware edit, N. Teller registered the lighting protocol, each and every log entry, each cycle of the lights, each fingerprint of design, mine. It wasn't dread that made my palms shake. I had evidence. That evening, I didn't return to the co-op. I reserved a cheap motel off the highway, the kind with drapes that never close all the way, and too much chlorine in the air. However, I slept. I slept through the night for the first time in what seemed like an eternity, because I now had proof something I hadn't even allowed myself to hope for. No more uncertainty. No more spirals of self-blame at night. Without a doubt, the logs from the prototype belonged to me. Eli never even considered cleaning up the metadata, which was stamped with my initials, timestamps, and development tags. I wasn't going to sue him. I was aware of the length, cost, and exhaustion of that route. I knew that the courts favored those with better lawyers, not those with better ideas, because I had read enough founder horror stories. It wasn't about pulling him down. However, my goal was to bring my voice back into the spotlight. I therefore became strategic. One of their largest events, Light and Earth Sustainable Design in Practice, was open to non-traditional formats this year, and the co-op board was wrapping up proposals for it that weekend. Installations, interactive components, works without names. I anonymously filled out the form. Mixed is the medium. Materials: biocircuitry resin, repurposed wood, and embedded live organisms. Name of artist upon request withheld. I then got to work building. I made a lattice out of driftwood that I had gathered from the lake, cut and sanded. Similar to the original BioGlow concept, I incorporated the moss panels into hexagonal clusters, but I organized them in a way that softly spiraled inward. A solitary living panel in the middle pulsed with the gentle green-blue light that I had created years before. It wasn't ostentatious. It didn't cry out for notice. However, it was a story. Inheritance is what I named it. I drove the completed artwork to the gallery and put it in the main room's corner a week before the exhibit started. A little touchscreen that I had wired myself was hidden inside the base. Visitors may navigate through a simple interface that displayed the prototype's embedded log data when they tapped it. Teller is the developer. Original lighting protocol. March 12th registration, independent design, origin. No charges were made. No big reveal. Just the facts. Truth was subtly woven into fiber and light, accessible to anybody who was interested. Opening night arrived sooner than I had anticipated. The exhibition was bustling with visitors, engineers, donors, and students. I was standing in the back with my sketchbook tucked under my arm, dressed in trousers and a borrowed blazer. I wasn't there to draw attention. I wanted to see him notice it, though. About an hour in, Eli arrived exactly on time. I was confident that someone would send the event page to him. For inspiration, tech workers constantly look through galleries. He showed up wearing his typical slightly wrinkled shirt, attempting to look both smart and laid back. I saw his brow furrow as he paused close to the installation. He leaned closer, tapped the screen. The instant it clicked, I watched. He took a hesitant step back. He glanced around the room as if his name had been called, but nobody had. It has nothing to do with him. He wasn't even on the list. Against the stark white walls of the gallery, the artwork stood alone, shining a gentle green. He was gone in a flash. Didn't pose inquiries. Didn't cause a stir. Simply departed. I kept my fingers wrapped around the edge of my sketchbook as I went home that evening under the streetlights. It seemed like armor, that leather cover worn by years of silence and moving. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't engaged in combat. I hadn't set anything on fire. However, I had recovered something necessary. It was written in a brilliance that no one could dim this time. The following day, I didn't return to the gallery. I didn't read any of the local reviews or look at the visiting statistics. I had previously wasted too much of my life chasing attention from others. Therefore, I didn't need approval from others. However, I received a call from Jules on Monday morning. She tried to sound informal as she said, "You might want to stop by. People are taking notice of your piece." Like actual attention. I mistook her for foot traffic. Press, she meant. After appearing on a local design blog, the article titled Inheritance was reposted by a tech ethics website with the following headline: "The origin story of BioGlow is subtly undermined by an anonymous artist, and they may even possess the receipts." With my sketchbook closed in my lap, I sat at my desk and gazed at the screen. That was not how I had intended it. Eli wasn't tagged by me. I didn't even mention him by name. However, the math had been done by someone. The visual structure was compared, the log information, the date stamps, and there had been a voice, someone who had heard the narrative. I received a direct message from a well-known person that afternoon, Len B. Eli's initial investor, the believer of the unlikely duo. "Hello, Nora. I spotted the artwork in the gallery. It's stunning. Quiet yet appropriately loud. I've always been curious about what actually transpired. I would love to speak with you if you ever want to build something again on your terms." I read it twice, but then again. I then shut down my laptop and went outside into the bright, chilly afternoon to stand in the parking lot and squint at the wind. I eventually flipped to the page after the final prototype diagram when I opened my sketchbook later that evening. I also began sketching something fresh. 3 other local investors had contacted us by Friday. In Minnesota, there was a community development initiative and an East Coast women-led design co-op. They didn't request justifications. They didn't inquire as to Eli's whereabouts. They inquired about my next course of action. I gave it some thought for the first time in a long time. I wasn't prepared to grow a business once more. Not quite yet. But I was prepared to construct. With those, I trusted on my own schedule. I didn't want a seed fundraising round a press release or a boardroom. I desired a studio, 3 people on the team, a few undertakings that have real significance. I made that then. After 6 weeks, I created Northlight Design, a creative lab and workshop that is situated above a little bookshop on the outskirts of town. We concentrated on environmentally friendly public space installations, such as lamps for moss-lined walkways, solar-powered benches with charging stations, and nature-inspired illumination for school gardens. Basic things, but authentic concrete. Nice. We didn't use a press kit to publicize our launch. We simply started working. That was louder than anything Eli ever did somehow. I got a certified envelope a month after I moved into the new studio. I recognized the handwriting, but there was no return address. There was a check inside, not from a business, from Eli. A personal check for $42,000, the precise amount of our initial angel finance made out to me. Not a word. Don't apologize, only a check. I didn't cash it. Rather, I sent it back with a picture of the gallery item attached to the envelope, and a single sentence scrawled on the image's reverse. "Once light is shared, it cannot be purchased back." I went to the gallery one evening in March after work. The inheritance had been discreetly acquired. An unidentified donor wanted it to be put up at a downtown public library, but the display had concluded weeks before. Before they moved it, Jules allowed me to come. The room was silent and dark. As previously, the moss panels continued to glow softly. I spent some time sitting in front of it, with my sketchbook open on my knees. After that, I took something out of my coat's inner pocket that I hadn't touched since the week I had unpacked it from storage, a little thumb drive. Lightlog Backup. Original Dev Tags is the label. I slid it beneath the wooden backdrop of the exhibit and placed it into a tiny envelope. For whoever finds it one day, it's just a silent reminder, an echo in the circuitry. Evidence not only of what I had constructed, but of the person I was when I constructed it. After 6 months, there was a rhythm in the studio. Our workspace was on the 2nd floor above a second-hand bookshop and a bakery that opened too early and had a constant cinnamon scent. A single long table in the center of the room was occupied by my team, which consisted of me, Elle, a graduate student, and Wes, a part-time carpenter. I usually brought coffee. Playlists were brought by Elle. Chaos was brought by Wes. We weren't making news, but we were creating things a bench that became a popular site for the neighborhood kids' solar garden posts for a halfway house and an inexpensive lighting system for a nearby school. The type of work that cleaned your conscience but left your hands filthy, and it was sufficient. The news drew Eli away. The second launch of BioGlow failed. A few months ago, he announced a rebranding with a new logo, a new team, and an origin story that was far more inclusive. The article was not read by me. I didn't have to. According to a buddy of a friend, Len withdrew his funding. I didn't feel content. Not at all. Nothing but silence. I went to the library one morning in late September to see how Inheritance was doing. It was placed in the reading loft, where it provided just enough light for individuals to read in the early evening. This place had a different appearance. Not more opulent. Simply said more at ease. As if it had discovered its proper place in the world. Beneath it, a child was reading. He softly swung his legs off the bench. As the metadata moved over the panel, he tapped the side screen. He followed every line with his gaze. Then he returned to his book with a smile. For a time, I sat on the floor with my sketchbook in my lap and pretended to scroll through my phone. The one from the co-op days was different. Every page of that one had been used. I stored it in a wooden box called Before on a shelf in the studio. I was carrying a brand new one, still unable to lie flat with a tight spine. However, the first 6 pages were already occupied with notes in my own shorthand lighting schemes and Moss diagrams. Additionally, there was a tiny illustration of a house on a hill facing west, with light emanating from the ground rather than the sky. I grinned. Not because I had prevailed. However, I had prevented them from writing the conclusion. Some items are stolen. Some people are silenced. Some concepts are forgotten, rewritten, or sold off without acknowledgement. If you're patient, and a little bit stubborn though, you may discover that the true power isn't in the spotlight. The fingerprints contain it. The silent paths we abandon. When no one is looking, we fill the sketchbooks. We don't shout the truth. Instead, we let people discover it on their own, and the final sense of calm that comes from knowing you're not lost. You have documentation, on a page of your own, within your own grasp, right where you belong.